Got it now? Yep. Everybody hear me? All right, what did you want to be when you were 5 years old? For me, I didn't know what that was. I just knew I had a bunch of children's books, and I knew that my parents went off to work every day. So I'd look at these books. I don't know if I had these ones in particular, but sometimes I wanted to be a fireman. Sometimes I wanted to be a police officer like the dudes on Adam 12. I think there was a short time I wanted to be a doctor because my childhood hero, Rick Springfield, was on General Hospital. And obviously, a lot of people want to be an astronaut. You'll see here, even the garbage man gets some love when it comes to children's books. So there's all kinds of different occupations, and I knew I had to do something because, like I said, my parents went off to work every day. What I didn't know I wanted to be was a threat intelligence analyst. And thanks to Robert M. Lee, I now have a book that talks to threat intelligence at a very basic level, so that at night when I read my daughter her bedtime stories, she can see that I have the coolest job ever. So just like this book, I'm going to talk a little bit in my first part of the presentation about what threat intelligence is, give you a brief definition, and talk about some of the history of how we've gotten there through commercial companies. So I got this job as a threat intel analyst, and I knew that I was eventually going to need a threat intelligence platform. So the first thing I do is I go out like any good InfoSec professional, and I Google, and I find nothing. There's nobody's done this work, or at least they haven't published it. So I reach out to Rick Holland, and I say, hey, man, he's pretty big. He's at Forrester. He had this blog post and says, I'm going to release a bunch of research about threat intelligence platforms soon, and it's going to be all for you. And I was like, yes. So then I find out he's leaving Forrester. So who's going to take his place? As you can see, nobody. So despite some prodding, I still didn't get the stuff. So I have to go and do the research on my own. So just like this piece is, it's something I had to develop and share, and I thought, well, since it's not out there, I'll do a talk on it. So I'm going to talk, like I did with the overview in the background, I'm going to give you a little bit about myself. Then, like as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about Threat Intelligence 101, what a tip is, what a threat intelligence platform specifically is, and then I'm going to finish it up with some executive support. Quick disclaimer, this is a work in progress. I really haven't collaborated with too many people, but I'd love some collaboration. So anyone else that's interested in possibly making this a broader framework, I don't want it to obviously get too difficult, but in order to help everyone else with all the new emerging threat intelligence platforms that are out there, I'd love to collaborate with somebody else. Also, your mileage may vary, so apply what I'm going to show you to your own organization, or it's really not going to help you. And finally, I am representing myself. Neither my current employer or any of my past employers are sponsoring this talk. So real quick about me. And now that I've thrilled you with my coolest job ever, got a little extra proof there. I'm at Walt Disney. So I run their threat intelligence program as a cyber trends analyst is what we call it. I know most organizations call it cyber threat intelligence. Due to some issues, we are calling it cyber trends, which it still is an accurate term. Before Disney, I was here in the Northern Virginia area. I also moved to Richmond right before Disney. But before all that, I was a SIGINT analyst, so I've been doing intelligence since I was 19 years old. And then followed it up with a bunch of government contracting work at MITRE at the FBI, Lockheed Martin for the Army, Deloitte for the Department of State, and Foggy Bottom, and then CGI. I'm also a volunteer threat intelligence analyst for the Global Emancipation Network. It's an offering run by Sergio Caltagirone and Sherry, his wife. She's actually the head, he's the brains. And it's an effort to eradicate human trafficking and by getting in front of the financial avenues that those human traffickers use. I also have a few interests. I'm trying to currently use OSINT to prove that Prince William is Facebook stalking me, because when I met my wife, Kate, 6 months later, he got a Kate. And then when we decided to name my daughter Charlotte, he, a year later, named his daughter Charlotte. So if anyone wants to help me out with that, I'd be very much appreciated. I also have 3 dogs, and I'm working on my own Iditarod team, but that's my wife's fault. Since I don't have enough time and enough stuff to do between my work and my family and my 3 dogs, I also golf, so if you need something to talk to me about tonight after I've had a few drinks, I'm happy to talk about this. I'm also a board member at the Mickey Mouse Golf League. It's our own company-run league, and I'm a team captain for the Pin-Ack Attack team that we named on the Disney Bowling League. So now that I've thrilled you with my personal background and the coolest job ever, let's talk about what threat intelligence is. I promise I don't have too many memes. I know it's an InfoSec presentation thing. We all do. We have too many. I've only got 3, and one of them I actually created myself, but not this one. Threat Connect's actually using this on their current T-shirts, which is pretty cool. They've actually pulled away from the Disney-themed Star Wars stuff they're using, and they went with Princess Bride. Because threat intelligence really isn't a common word that people agree on what it means. So here's a lengthy definition by Gartner, but to me, that's too complicated. So I'm going to go back to Robert M. Lee and the guy who developed the Threat Intelligence and Me children's book. He says, a threat is specifically those things that have intent, opportunity, and capability to do you harm. So that's what you're concerned about. How do you track that stuff and provide information on that? Through intelligence, but it requires the analysis of lots of information to make an assessment. So when you put threat intelligence, those 2 words together, you come up with a very simple definition by Robert that says it helps organizations prioritize their security efforts, make organizational change, and drive security, and that's the important piece. Drive security. So you are helping your businesses improve their security with information and intelligence. This is the one I created myself. Let's see if it takes off, because I love bacon. I saw there was somebody here from NCC Group. I found this definition. It was a long sentence. I wrote it out into different criteria, which I actually think is very poignant as far as threat intelligence goes. So in this definition, companies in this sector, Sony, in this geography, worldwide, have been targeted or successfully compromised by Lazarus Group in 2014, by someone we're calling a bad actor. I said Lazarus Group, who exhibits this type of behavior. They like to stay in their network long time, exfiltrate lots of data, uses these tools. So DDoS, they got 45 unique malware families at the time. I think they first attacked Sony, remote access Trojans, keyloggers, those type of tools, who typically targets this type of data. So Lazarus has been doing a lot of new financial stuff, but back then they were looking to humiliate Sony through the capturing of their emails and obviously destroy servers. They infiltrate in this manner using malware and social engineering, and they use this type of communication to speak with each other. So these are the criteria you need to think about when you're developing threat intelligence. So how do we get from government to a commercial capability in threat intelligence? First, obviously we know governments and the military have been doing intelligence work for a long time. In fact, the joke in the intelligence world is that intelligence is the 2nd oldest profession in the world. But with the creation of the internet, we needed some way to get ahead of this type of information. So in 1995, which some of you may, since you're close to Northern Virginia, you may know, the Land Information Warfare activity was stood up, and it was created in the Information Dominance Center. And the reason I show these pictures is to show your hard tax dollars at work here. and why there's, and the huge investment that came into threat intelligence. This second floor underground basement layer, as it's been known, is the Information Dominance Center. They actually hired a Hollywood producer to build this to make it look like the Star Trek Enterprise. In fact, this seat right here is rumored to be from a fine Italian sports car. And you can see the conference table looks just like the Star Trek symbol. So there's a lot of investment going on right at the end of the 90s in threat intelligence. But then 2001, 9/11 happened. So there was a big resurgence of funds being given to military and organizations, especially in the world of intelligence. And in 2002, they redesignated to the 1st Information Operations Command under U.S. Cyber Command. So we've been doing it in military and government for a while, the cyber threat intelligence thing. But what we saw happen in around 07, 08 was the ability, and some of the contractors who've been doing this for government military saw a need for their own companies to have a threat intelligence capability. And then they further saw that move into a ability to sell it and make money off of it. So in 2008, 08, we saw some of those vendors who were doing it as contractors start to seed threat intelligence for commercial capabilities. One other big thing that's happened, and it helped threat intelligence platforms specifically. This is a picture of from informationisbeautiful.net, and it's a representation of all the major data breaches. I narrowed it down from 2013 to 2015. And you can see Rick Holland again, I'm referencing him. He said before 2014, only 1% of commercial companies did threat intelligence. And those were obviously government contractors because they've had some capability and their people that are working for them are doing it for the government. Financial, because they got a lot of money and they need to protect their networks. And then the high tech, like Microsoft's and Cisco's. After 2014, we saw a huge surge, and more than the 10% are starting to do threat intelligence. That included energy, retail, and healthcare. But what happened to cause this? And you'll see right at the beginning of 2013, Target, 70 million records breached, mostly credit card data. Obviously, that hurt them a little bit. They now have a big threat intelligence team. I think it's like 10 people at least, and I'm a team of 1 at Disney. So that was early 2013, and then another retailer, Home Depot, was hit in the middle of 2013, and then obviously I've already mentioned Sony, and they're hiding right back here, Sony Pictures behind the NASDAQ. This this picture used to be a lot better before the damn Yahoo stuff was divulged, but since it happened back then, now it kind of takes up the whole graph. But you can see that right at 2014 is when we saw a huge increase in threat intelligence offerings for commercial companies. So obviously there's a need. There's going to be companies coming around to satisfy that need. One of the first ones that I knew of providing commercial threat intelligence analysis capability was Eyesight Partners. In fact, I worked with a lot of those guys in the Army Reserve who started that company. 2009, Recorded Future started. They are a more automated, they have some machine learning that does dark web scraping and that type of stuff. They came around. They've been developing that offering since 2009. 2011, CrowdStrike. Can't really see the logo on there, but they use, the Fancy Bear, the country naming systems with animals. They came up in 11, and then Cyber Squared, a government contractor, also started in 2011, but they eventually was spun off to Threat Connect. I think there's still a Cyber Squared capability, but the main commercial offering is a threat intelligence platform called Threat Connect. And right before that, in 2013, 2 other big players, Anomaly and Threat Quotient, were started. So now that we've level set the definition and we're all speaking the same language about what threat intelligence is, and you know the history, on how it's become a commercial capability. Let's discuss what threat intelligence sources are, so we can talk eventually about a tip. There are 4 main sources, and these come from the traditional government intelligence world. The first one is technical, and it's really not threat intelligence, it's more data, but it provides threat intelligence. A lot of people say IOCs are technical threat intelligence, but they're not. There's, like I said, they're data. This type of intelligence or data is going to feed your SOC and your IR staffs, the people that have to do the incident response. So if something's already happened, they need to retroactively look back and see what more information they can find out to either investigate the breach or prevent it in the future. Operational data or operational threat intelligence is actionable input to detection and prevention. So your network defenders, your firewall, IDS, and your SIM who are doing your alerting, they're going to want operational type data. Tactical data, so that's something you feed to your system administrators and your architects, helps them prioritize their actions, not only from a workload standpoint, but also financially. And then finally, strategic. A lot of organizations will have you doing that first because the executives are the one that approve the money flow. Strategic is more finished reporting, so writing executive level reports on a specific threat intelligence capability. So where do you get all this data and this information to help you do that? Well, the best source of intelligence or data for developing threat intelligence is internally. Crowdsourcing your own phishing emails. If you have a Phish Me or something like that tool, you can use that, and your log and network data. If you're not looking at your own network data, your logs, you're not going to be able to accurately assess what threat intelligence is pertinent to you. Some other sources, government, obviously, they provide law enforcement. If you're a member of InfraGard, which a lot of people here are, FBI does some Cyberhood Watch memberships based on your line of business. NSA puts out reports, and same thing with the certs. So the US cert here will put out finished reporting. Another good one is industry. So Target and Home Depot. If Target had been able to, maybe they did, I don't know, but if they had been able to share some of the data they saw, maybe they would have been able to pass that to Home Depot or somebody else, and maybe they already have to help stop that in the future. So your business partners, the same people that you're working with. Also, industry organizations, RVAsec, if you're a financial services company, there's an ISAC for just about every different line of business. And then industry relationships, that's what we're here for, right? To be at the conference and hopefully share information. You can also get threat intelligence through OSINT. There's a lot of public feeds out there, Bambanek, there's a lot of C2 malware, IP domains, that type of stuff. And then in-house collection, maybe you have an intelligence organization that pulls in data from your dark web, your attacker forums. Also Twitter, it's a great one. I'm on Twitter all the time. And then finally, commercial. So that's the ones you got to pay for. Not cheap, but sometimes well worth it. They'll combine public and do some vertical specific to your organization and also human, and provide you those feeds at a cost. So now you understand what type of threat intelligence you need to provide your organization and where you're going to get it. What do you do with it once you get it? You need a threat intelligence platform, and this was the first threat intelligence platform known to mankind. I use it, you can't see the grids here, but this is a screenshot of Microsoft Excel. I use it in the government, not effectively as a threat intelligence platform, but I know a lot of people, this is where they got their start in tracking their data that they were concerned with. Obviously, it's not designed to do that. So let's talk about what an effective tip should do. The Wikipedia definition, it's an emerging technology. So remember I said 2014 really was the catalyst for threat intelligence overall. So that's only, 3 years ago? So it still is emerging technology discipline. It helps you aggregate, correlate, and analyze threat data from multiple sources. And it helps you support defensive actions. Rick Holland says it should be the quarterback of your operations. It allows the threat intelligence analyst to call the shots. And then Threat Connect also says that it's security relevant data that only you care about. So a tip should help you aggregate and pull all that information in. 4 core functions of the tip: aggregate, analyze, pivot, and collaborate. I'll go over those in a little bit more detail in the next slides. Expanded, you need to ingest threat intelligence and normalize it in your tip. So there's all these different sources you have. You want it all to look the same as you're analyzing it. A tip will help you do that. Rate sources over time. Tell me which open source intelligence feeds are not valuable or are valuable to me as I move along through using my tip so that I can get rid of some of the extra chaff. Provide an analyst workspace. You said 35 tabs open. That's pretty typical for a threat intelligence analyst. So give me one thing that I can use to pull in all that data and I don't have to tab back and forth. Visualization and pivoting. Obviously, if you can visualize something, you can analyze it a little bit better. Pivoting is the same thing. It gives you more information. It lets you follow the breadcrumbs. Provide enrichment. Give me some scoring capability for the threat intelligence I'm pulling in so that I know if I can trust a certain source or a certain piece of threat intelligence more than another. And finally, enable internal and external collaboration. So the best threat intelligence is the ones that the stuff that you get from people you can share with. All right, now that we know what it is, let's discuss some functions. First one I mentioned was aggregate. Automatically ingest internal and external data feeds. So here we see an example from Anomaly. You're pulling in malware, documents, emails, stuff in sticks format. You need all this stuff, like I said, to come into a common area and normalize it for you. So aggregate and bulk download. Obviously, the biggest reason you want a tip is to analyze. Help you understand what's relevant to your organization and gain visibility. So here we see an example from Threat Connect. They have some enrichment. They have some scoring that's applied through their partners that also use the tool. So it can help me decide which intelligence is more relevant or that I should take action on more quickly. Pivot, I mentioned this earlier. It helps you follow the breadcrumbs. So here I show the diamond model. Andy Pendergrass of Threat Connect was one of the co-authors of that when he was at Lockheed, I believe. It shows the 4 main components of threat intelligence and what you should be concerned with. The diamond model suggests that if you can at least get 3 of these, maybe even 2, you can figure out and deduce the other one on your own. So in this case, you're looking at your adversary. You know what typical things Lazarus does. You know what infrastructure they target and they use themselves. You know what kind of victims they're doing now. They begin to finance. Obviously, they had some recent failures if it was them with the malware, with WannaCry. And if you didn't know capabilities before, you should, with those 3 pieces of information, you should be able to figure out their capabilities. Or if you have capabilities, victims, and infrastructure, you should be able to say with some certainty the group or the adversary that's targeting you. All right, last main function, collaborate. Securely share data with your peers. Anomaly says that you should be able to communicate and collaborate with like-minded peers and experts. It's perfect. If you can't get threat intelligence from your own data, the next best data is coming from people who are also doing your same type of business. So for myself at Disney, Marvel, Pixar, Lucas, those type of guys, I want to be able to collaborate and see what they're seeing. On the other hand, I also want to be able to collaborate with Sony and whoever, but I don't want to share the same type of information with them. So using traffic light protocol or TLP, I can assign a different TLP level to different pieces of data and allow my tip to automatically share or not share, depending on who's logged in and seeing that information. I love this quote that Anomaly put on their website: threat intelligence sharing is a force multiplier. So that's a military term. If you're not familiar with it, it's a combination of attributes that dramatically increases the effectiveness of an item. Basically, it allows you to accomplish greater things than without it. So remember the bacon on your InfoSec sandwich. Tip benefits. There's a bunch. I've listed a few here. Prevent analyst overload, obviously tabbing back and forth and having to track all this different information. The tip can help prevent some of that. Provide a single workspace, again, same thing. Enrich indicators. So give me some scoring so I can prioritize my intelligence. Alert me to things that I may have not been looking at. Create organizational intelligence. Say I'm only there for 3 years and I leave, and I've put all this data into the tip. This will help me record it, and the next guy that comes on is going to be able to hopefully pick up somewhere where I left off. And finally, collaborate with industry partners. So, we know the benefits, we know we want one, but how do we decide which one to buy? Well, for me, there's a lot of different tips out there. I mentioned Threat Connect, Threat Streams Anomaly, Threat Quotient, and their sales guys their job is to tell you that their tip is the best, and they wouldn't be a good salesman if they weren't. But is it the right tip for you? And that's where I'm going to get into this, where you develop requirements to make sure that the tip you're about to buy will help your organization. So like I said, I was about to start this exercise. I Googled, didn't find anything. Hit up Rick Hahn, the expert, nothing. So no, Google, I failed. So let's go back to my MITRE days. Hey, I developed requirements when I was there. I can evaluate a product. And I went back and I pulled up the MITRE way of developing requirements, and I said, man, I don't need all this. This is too complicated. Let's boil it down. Let's make it a little bit simpler. So I'm going to do that for you. This, to me, is, in a nutshell, really what you need to do. First thing is identify and interview stakeholders. So you and whoever else is going to be using the tool are your primary stakeholders. Whoever is going to gain intelligence from it, they're also your secondary stakeholders. So interview them, talk to them. Make sure you're using your intelligence requirements. Hopefully you developed that already. You have some priority intelligence requirements, like we call them in the Army. So you know exactly what you want to be collecting on. Talk to those people about daily use cases. How are you going to use this tool? I talk about collaboration a lot. So if you're not deciding on the typical ways you might use this tool, especially with your other tools, your SIM, your firewall, that type of stuff, you may miss some requirements that you have. And obviously the brainstorming of all that. Once you have all that stuff put together, assess your needs. Do some product research. The vendors all got great marketing material. They've done some of your work for you. So use what they've developed. And also take those stakeholder interviews. Put that all together, and you should be able to come up with some type of high-level set of requirements. Categorize. Once you've got all these disparate different things, for me, I had 108 different requirements when I was all finished. Make them all into like groups. And then finally, scoring, weighting, and normalizing. I'm going to get into details about that. All right, so the first category I created was called collection. That's ingesting data and normalizing. Here's some things that it should do. It should be able to do these things manually and automatic. Pull in structured data, so sticks, format, OpenIOC, pull in some stuff from spreadsheets, comma separated, XML, whatever, and then unstructured data. So your PDFs, your Word docs, your emails, you should be able to find hash values, IP addresses, things that matter to you, and pull those into your tip automatically when you send it. Correlation, that's the visualize and pivot. So store knowledge of affected assets. Remember I talked about making sure that threat intelligence is your organization. It has your data in it or it's not valuable. So if I can pull in logs from my firewalls and my endpoint protection systems, I can more accurately determine threat intelligence's value to me. Store knowledge of previous exploits, automate some of your pivoting. Let me see some things that may not be immediately obvious through visualization and pivoting. And provide analytics to predict important IOCs. So do a little bit of scoring and weighting to help me with that. Enrichment, contextualize my data. Give me some criticality ratings so I know what's important to me. Deprecate IOCs, IP addresses, how long do they really matter to you? 3 days, maybe? A hash never changes, so that's, I don't know, 30 days, maybe never. Domain names, 7 days. So a tip should be able to pull that stuff out automatically so I don't have to be concerned with making sure it's deleted and when it's no longer relevant. Should also be able to characterize observed threat actors. So their capabilities, vulnerabilities, exploited, the tools, the TTPs. Give me some characteristics so that when I see something, it gives me that enrichment capability to say, oh, I need to go look at this as well. This previous attack, this other piece of intelligence, and come up with a finished report. Provide finished intelligent enrichment to IOCs. So some tip vendors are now have an analysis team on site. They do finished intelligence and they will add some of that to the product automatically for you. Integration. Does it have an API? Can it connect to my SIEM, my firewalls, IDSs? Does it have a ticketing system built in or does it connect with my own ticketing system? So that when I'm in it, I can automatically create a ticket or associate a particular IOC with an incident in a ticket. Can I ingest events from SIEMs and endpoints, or can I push it? Can I push to a SIEM or an endpoint and correlate existing intelligence? Can I query a log source in my environment? These are all integration things that are very important that you need to consider about, especially when you look back at these categories when you're doing your interviews and your use cases. Take action. That's probably one of the primary things you want to be able to do is alert you or your team members to important intelligence. Task team members. So, hey, I just saw this IOC. I need somebody on the incident response team to go look at this. Or threat hunt. I need that guy to go back and I just saw that Sony was hit with this. Let's make sure we're not hit with this. Can we communicate so we don't have to leave the tool? Does it have sticks? And also access control. So if it doesn't have some built-in Active Directory support or single sign-on, does it have access control in the tool so that you can see who did what and prevent different access to certain levels of data? Allow multiple circles of trust. This is an anomaly term, circles of trust. So I mentioned at Disney we have Marvel, Pixar, Lucas. I want to be able to share pretty much everything almost with them, but anonymously I might want to be able to share with some other entertainment company that's also using the tool. So let me set up circles of trust so that I can decide who can see what information. And finally, operations. This is a little, for me, I don't manage the back end, but for you, you might. Depends on how big your team is. You may have somebody that does this for you, a system administrator. Let them weigh in on this. Does it have a fully supported API? Plugins for Active Directory, like I spoke about. User event logging, so that's a concern. So if somebody starts to pull in a ton of different open source intelligence feeds and polluting all my information, I want to know who did that and find out why. Does it have a frequently asked questions or some kind of help system built into it? And how easy is it to update? Depends on what operating system it's sitting on, all that good stuff. All right, so now you've categorized the different requirements you developed. The next thing you need to do is a scoring and weighting exercise. And for me, I went kind of simple. I came up with these 4 different criteria for scoring. 0, it does not meet that particular requirement. So if I give, does the product have single sign-on? That's either a yes or a no, or Active Directory support. If it doesn't, that's a 0. If it does, it's a 3. And because there's requirements are written in different ways, you got to have something in between, so substantially or partially satisfies. The weighting is giving some requirements more weight or oomph than others. So this is a multiplication factor. 5 is got to have it, or it's not worth the product or that particular requirement. 3, desirable, and 1 is, it would be nice to have if you do it. All right, so I mentioned the normalizing in one of the first slides for this requirements development. So here's the 8 categories I talked about. There's also a couple source metrics as part of enrichment, and then the usability was an actual add-on. It's more of a gut feeling type of thing, like how did it compare now that you've, and actually you can't even do usability until you've looked at both products, and you may want to, it's got very few requirements, but it's something still to give you a little gut feel on how the product went. But basically, the normalizing exercise is a facilitated exercise. You sit down with the team that's going to use it, and you say, for me, let's for the example, what's the 2 most important categories for you? Well, let's say the team says collection and integration. So you give those a 20. Your end goal is to come up with 100. So all these categories should add up to 100. And this is going to be your percent out of 100. The normalization gives you a total score at the end, so that to an executive, they get a B, C, D, or F score, basically. And I have all this built into the spreadsheet that I will share if you'd like at the end. So obviously I mentioned there's a lot of different product out there, and you may not have time to evaluate all of it. That's when down select comes in handy. So let's say you can only take time to do this full requirements review of 2 products, but 3 or 4 have come to demo and you want to give everyone a fair shot. So for me, at a high level, I can narrow it down to 3 things. And price is probably number 1 for my organization. So what does it cost? That's going to be a big factor. The demo, did they come in and wow the team, and the team said, I like this feature, I like that feature. And finally, the answer to the requirements. So I've edited the whole requirements document, which is in a spreadsheet. I basically took out all the scoring, and I just said, do you think you meet this requirement, yes or no? And if you want to provide additional comments, feel free. So how does the sales guy answer this? How well does he do this and make you feel? Those 3 things allow you to get down to maybe a 2-product bake-off with the requirements. So once you have the 2 you want to do, the spreadsheet's got all the weights in it automatically. That's the second column, the 5s and 3s that you see for integration. You want to sit down, if you can pull the tool up with the team that's going to use it, so you can actually try to do some of the things that each requirement says. Or maybe you have a screenshot, or I even had part of the actual technical team that worked for the product come and develop and do some demoing because I wasn't able to. But at that time is when you score each requirement. Plug in your numbers 0, 1, 2, or 3 in the first column. It multiplies them, comes up with a total on the far right. And then over here up the top left, total score. So every category you should end up getting a total score. And here is my scoring process. So one day I'm golfing, as I often am. I teed off by myself on this day and caught up to a guy who was playing by himself, and I did the niceties and the intros, and I said, "Where do you work?" And he said, "I work at the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena." I was like, "Oh, cool, you're a rocket scientist. What do you do there?" "Well, I calculate fuel density and weight and load to make sure that the rockets can go where they need to go." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I happened to be doing this right at the same time I met this guy. And obviously it's hard to talk him through all this while we're golfing and not interrupt the flow, but as I could, I explained my process, and I said, "So what do you think?" I fell asleep in statistics in college. I did just enough to get by. So I'm thinking it's probably a little flawed, but what do you think as an overall process? And what he told me was, if you evaluate each product the same way, this is a good process. So NASA JPL validated. So here's the process. You saw my spreadsheet shows you the scores. For integration, we came up with 54 for a total score in that particular product, right? The spreadsheet automatically tells you what the best possible score is. So in this case, for integration, it was a 162. If you were to give every requirement a 3, multiply it by whatever weight you decided, leave those the same, and you would get a total score of 162. So the first thing you do with the spreadsheet, once you fill in all the totals, it's going to tell you your total score of 54 for integration divided by the best possible score of 162 is a 33%. So in integration, that tool scored a 33 out of 100. Then you need to find the category weighted percent. This is the normalized score. Remember I said we were normalizing, saying which categories mean more than others. 33% of integration, which was a 20, is a 6.6. So this particular product, out of 100, scored a 6.6. At the end, you add up all your categories, your 6s, your 10s, your 20s, and you get a final score. Fortunately, I've done all that work for you. I have a spreadsheet. If you email me, I'll send it to you, and you can just pop in your scores if you find yourself in this exercise. So that was a lot of technical requirements and mathematical equation discussions. Before I go on to the final thing, I have one last thing I want to tell you about. What questions do you have? You have any? Good. So if you don't have any questions, I'll be up here later. You can catch me, buy me a free drink at the party later, but get me early. All right, so I got one last tip for you. Nothing? Yeah, my wife came up with that one. You can blame her. Executive support. So you've done this scoring exercise, and you decided which tip is going to be the one for you based on your score. How do you get the executives to give you the money for it? Because they're not cheap. You know, most of them are sitting at the $250,000 range, maybe higher. First thing you want to do is educate them on threat intelligence. Hey, my slides, I'll give those to you too. Go through what threat intelligence is. Make it pertinent to your organization, obviously. Pull in your intelligence requirements. Give them a definition of what threat intelligence is, because it's not always agreed upon. Tell them a little bit of history and why they need it. Tell them the benefits of what a tip is and some of the functions that will help you provide them threat intelligence with this tip that you've scored. When you're doing that, know what they care about. What keeps them up at night? This was my last meme. I didn't create that one either, but it's pertinent. So what are they afraid of? Obviously, their intelligence requirements are going to be a lot of that. Make sure it matches your strategic goals. You work for me, I work for a larger security organization within Disney, and they have strategic goals. So does my threat intelligence and my platform going to help me meet those goals? Well, if it does, then my executives are going to be much more likely to buy into it, give me the money for it. And finally, if you're a big enough organization, you probably have a risk framework. So is the tip going to help you satisfy some of the risk in your risk framework? Are you going to be able to answer some of those things? As you're thinking about it, your criteria for success, directly related to your organizational goals and strategic objectives, like I just spoke about. Make sure that it meets your intelligence requirements. Be quantitative. I just helped you with a big old spreadsheet full of numbers. So it's definitely quantitative. You give them a hard score out of 100 and you said, sir, ma'am, this product scored 80 and the other product we evaluated scored a 60. And here's how it's going to meet our intelligence requirements. Tell them that it's a force multiplier. Tell them about all the things it's going to help you do if you didn't have it and you were using Excel spreadsheets. And make sure it's fiscally responsible. So obviously, like I said, it's a big ask for a purchase like that. So tell them, if you can, for your organization, how this is going to reduce your risk, your cost to the organization down the road. All right, so I talked a little bit about myself. I gave you some definitions and what a tip is and how to evaluate it, and hopefully you can get some executive support. If you'd like to contribute, like I said, please email me. I'd be happy to expand on this and maybe get it into a full offering. Or if you need the spreadsheet or the slides, email me as well at jasonwonn@gmail.com. Thank you.